Welcome back to Producer's Toolbox. I'm your host, Carole Adrienne, and today we have a super special guest who is going to talk to us about the realm of possibility for shooting in other countries. Now, we've all seen documentaries and travelogues about Africa, which is one of my favorite things. And surely filmmakers, aspiring filmmakers and content creators, you've probably thought about doing that yourself. And Doug Crisman, who is a television producer, documentarian, and international filmmaker, does exactly that. And he is going to talk to us about that realm of possibility, how to do it, to not just think about it, but to get out there in the bush, shooting incredible footage, how you or I can actually do that. So Doug Crisman, welcome to Producer's Toolbox, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Oh, I love your introduction to Tanzania. Doug he's working on more than one project in the African country of Tanzania, and he's made some beautiful pieces about it, and we're going to put up his YouTube channel at the end of this program, and you can go to The Surprised Traveler and see Doug all over the world, really, from Africa to India and everywhere in between.
There is no better place to encounter a life-changing experience and enjoy the thrill of adventure than in Africa. And Tanzania is one of those places we didn't want to miss. Our expectations were surpassed as we encountered spellbinding surprises along the way. As a testament to that, our friends Mike and Bev Christina, who arranged this trip, have returned 18 times over the last 32 years and have had new magical surprises every trip. But for now, let the adventure begin.
Nice jump. Look at that. Which type of monkeys are they? Burbot. Burbot. Yeah, well
It's exciting.
yeah. But, yeah,
There it goes.
Cool.
Oh my goodness.
I knew he was going to do that.
You will see from this first episode why we totally understand Mike and Bev's love for Tanzania. I'd like to introduce you to Mike and Bev Christina. They're going to join us remotely from their home in Connecticut, and they're going to bring us up to date on their latest trip to Tanzania and then share the evening with us talking about the adventures that we had.
So let's talk a little bit about the documentary that you're working on about the guide in Tanzania. Doug, can you tell us a little about that?
Sure. Currently, I'm working on a documentary around the life of a very well-known safari guide, Paul Oliver, that went to Tanzania in 1988, a British fellow, when he was about 25, and unfortunately passed away in 2021. But in that time period, he made a huge impression on the tourist industry and also in conservation of wildlife and working with the indigenous communities to actually get them involved in the protection of the wildlife. So he shared his revenue from his camp. He created a camp called Oliver's Camp in the Tarangire National Park that still exists today. And so he's just got a wonderful life of great people. It's given me an opportunity to speak with kind of all the people of his age that were in their 60s that really were part of the whole movement in Tanzania to bring protection of wildlife and conservation and tourism, which was one of the driving forces and is one of the driving forces of the economy of Tanzania today. So it's an exciting project. I'm meeting a lot of wonderful new people. Been over there interviewing people in country, also using virtual tools like this, like Zoom, to work with and interview people all over the world that knew Paul and have since scattered. So it's an excellent opportunity to take my skills to the next level. I'm also involving a local organization there called Afrosos, who's helping me with some local talent actually produce the film.
Wow. Now, there's something that all filmmakers really need to consider, no matter where we're shooting, whether we're in New York City or in Beijing, which is the local culture and etiquette. And Africa is going to have its own set of strictures involving that. Can we talk now? I know, like, let's say in Philadelphia, if you're going to shoot something, you get location releases, you get permission from the local film office, you get releases from the people you're shooting. What happens when you are shooting as far away as Tanzania? How do you set that up to be legal and welcomed?
Okay. Well, I think whether you're in Philadelphia or I now live in Kansas City, in the United States, there's rules by each city, but it also depends on the category of filming that you're doing. If you're just doing some, tourism-like filming as a tourist that then you want to turn into a movie when you get home and share with your friends, or maybe just a localized showing of it, you're probably not going to worry too much about releases in terms of locations unless you're going into, a museum or some sort of publicly owned building. Now, you would probably be you'd have to be more sensitive to certain things in foreign countries. For example, in most of the countries that I've gone into, don't go near a police station or a military base and take pictures. Okay, it's not a good idea. They will actually take action against you for doing that if they catch you. And you don't really want that to happen. But just as a tourist, or just in my amateur role of making films, when I've gone to any country, I really haven't had to worry about releases because I've been using my iPhone or a very small video camera that, is handheld. And it's really not necessary because they allow pictures to be taken, either for photographs or video, unless it's posted otherwise, without any need for releases or permits. And even for individuals, if you're just catching the general public and it's not in any way exploiting someone, I don't worry too much about that. So that's always the same. But if you get it up to the next level and you're really going in to make a professional film, now you really need to be talking about even, specific location releases that require government approvals.
You were saying, interestingly, the other day that there are two levels of filmmaking in that kind of situation. Like you were saying, if you're on a tourist safari and you're using your iPhone, or you're on the streets just filming with your iPhone, and we know you can get really high quality footage with them now. Absolutely. But if you want to go in with a crew in a place like Tanzania, how do you go about that? And is there a language barrier?
Well, in Tanzania, there is a language barrier. Most of the locals speak Swahili, which is spoken pretty much in Eastern Africa, in Tanzania and in Kenya. But they also, most people you'll run into, guides, people in government, they would speak English as well. Now, but if you get out with locals or you're just in the general public, the taxi driver, the a tuk-tuk driver, well, they call them bajenjis, but they would in fact not speak English. So you're going to have trouble communicating. So typically, if you go on a safari, you've got a guide, you've got a safari company that that set everything up for you. So you're really going to places where people speak English. They're taking very good care of you. They're pretty high-end accommodations. So you're not really going to run into a language barrier there. You've got, again, your guide, you've got the driver. They all know how to set you up for location, or you can even go on photo safaris where they're really for that purpose. And in those situations, I, by the way, typically was the only one that took video. Everybody else was taking photos. So it was kind of a different experience, and they weren't really quite used to that. Now, this was back in 2013 when I first went. Now, as I go, there's more people taking video, and there's more people aware of what you want from a video perspective. But that's changed a little bit. But if you're going the next level up and you're taking a crew, depends on how many people you're taking. Like I went out in Tarangire National Park in April, and I had a photographer, a videographer with me, who I knew as a friend, and I took him on the safari with me. So it was myself and him and our guide, a driver, and we went out and we shot. But we shot with just a regular, iPhone. I shot with an iPhone. He shot with a professional camera, but it was just a regular, handheld camera. Nothing that out of the ordinary that anybody would think about. So that didn't really pose any particular issue. We didn't get permits. If you're going to go out, though, and formally do a film, then you're going to pay a couple of $1,000s a day for filming permits in a national park. And you're going to have to get approval. It's not hard to get the approval, per se, but it does cost money. And the organization I work with over in Tanzania that does do filming, they always have to get permits to go into these areas. And they typically get some sort of a partner to help them pay for that because it does get expensive.
Now, what about, do you take a Western crew, or do you hire local cinematographers and crew?
Well, primarily I've done all the films on my own. So I haven't taken any crew. It's just been me. And I've just, been with the crowd, with whatever group I'm with, whether it's on a cruise, whether it's on a safari, or whether it's on a bus tour or whatever, depending on the country. But in Tanzania, I've gotten, and as I've evolved as an amateur filmmaker, I've actually started having crews with me, and I'm using local people over there. I really would recommend anybody going into a country that you'd use local film crews, because they speak the language, they understand the culture. I mean, as a producer and somebody from the outside, I need to always remember to be very courteous, be respectful, and that typically works in any country. But the crew is going to keep you out of trouble. The locals are going to keep you out of trouble. I have had no problems. I haven't had any problems in Tanzania because I've always had locals with me. And so I'm just completely accepted. I may be really the only American or even Caucasian that's in the vicinity, and yet it's been a very delightful experience. And that's because I have someone who, if I need to, can interpret, and also who understands the culture and knows, when to kind of guide me away from certain either habits that I have, or the way that I might speak to people, or the way I might even ask for access to a location, or to have an individual's on an interview or put on film.
I know when you're in a tourist area or in a city, no matter what continent it is, there is a certain level of sophistication and acceptance, if you will, going around film crews. But if you want to go, I hope this is the correct term, into the bush. Now, I know that you were mentioning that there are indigenous communities that speak more than 150 languages in Tanzania alone. If you want to go and film among any of the indigenous communities, how would that work in terms of culture and respect?
Okay. Well, first of all, to my knowledge, the experience that I've had, you don't go into an indigenous community without someone who represents that indigenous community bringing you in. You just don't all of a sudden drive up to an indigenous community and say hi. There's permits, there's organizations, particular NGOs or private organizations that actually represent some of these indigenous communities. These indigenous communities have community leaders. They basically, I think sometimes there's a misperception that these people aren't very smart because they're out in the bush. That is so untrue, because these are very intelligent people. They're smart enough to live off the land and survive in some cases, like the Hazabi, and they know how to do business. So they're sensitive to protecting their culture and their heritage, and at the same time, they're also recognize that they need, that it may be beneficial for them to have some people visit, but it's going to be through either a safari organization, a company that's created relationships with that community, or they've gotten the permits from other organizations that help represent them, and then you can go into those spaces. And if you're not going to go into a national park and meet with an indigenous community, it's not going to happen unless you've really prearranged that. And in most cases, there wouldn't be an indigenous community in the park; it would be outside the park, in what they call wildlife management areas, which are separately managed for communities, particularly the Maasai group in Tanzania. So you really do have to have done your homework and arranged it properly. It's not like going to Europe and saying, I'll just do it on my own. You can try that, but unless you end up making the right connections and meeting the right people, you're going to struggle.
You used an interesting term that always sounds exotic to me, which is fixer. That's Africa's a place where you really need to know a fixer.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I think that's the best way to go, particularly for a production company that's coming into Tanzania. Tanzania is not known for having a lot of filmmaking talent. That's the reason one of the NGOs I work with, called AfriSOS, trains local Tanzanians how to be filmmakers. And along with that, so that they're trying to help people be able to get a crew inside Tanzania rather than bring the crew in, because they really want Tanzanians telling their own story as Tanzanians from their point of view, not a Westerner coming in and telling it from a Westerner's point of view about what they think the Tanzanians are about. The fixer, on the other hand, sets up the permits, the equipment, the logistics, and can help arrange to get the talent. And then they would go to one of these organizations like AfriSOS or others and get the talent to help put the film together. And that takes care of the problems. So somebody from any foreign country can just go to this organization that's providing these permits, and all the fixer kind of, I call them, aspects of the production, and they'll take care of it for them.
For someone uninitiated or inexperienced, but wanting to go over to Tanzania, for example, and film, would you contact the embassy? Would you contact the NGOs in that country? How would you go about opening that door?
Well, again, I would actually go to, you could do it through the embassy. You could do it through the embassy. You could also do it through their cultural exchange office of the Tanzanian government. They have a film office that you could go to, and they could give you guidance. A lot of people, though, if you're just doing an amateur film, you don't really want to get into that level of sophistication and into these permits and so forth. Because if you're just taking a film for yourself, or like I said, localized, you don't have the budget to spend on $10,000 worth of permits, equipment, and so forth. I mean, you have a lot of leverage from the US dollar to the Tanzanian shilling. But when it comes to things like permits and they're dealing with Westerners, the prices are going to still be pretty high. But if you're just going locally and you've already brought your equipment with you, then that's a lot less money because when you, for example, want to rent a car and a driver for a day, that's going to cost you about $200. Okay, so but in Tanzanian shillings, it's a lot, thousands of shillings, tens of thousands of shillings. But that's a real bargain. Whereas if you went and set up with a safari guide, a safari team, and you went on a safari, that would cost you $1,000 a day. including accommodations and so forth. So I don't recommend necessarily if you're going to go as just an individual and you want to capture on your safari, or just you're going to go visit Tanzania on your own for a month, that you really just do it with your iPhone. And I wouldn't worry about permits. I wouldn't worry about government intervention, but I would find somebody that that knows somebody in Tanzania, that you have a connection. You need somebody in country that you can work with that can help you with the logistics and the customs, and be your contact to help you once you get there.
As an American and a Caucasian and clearly a foreigner in an African country, how would you go about before you get there? I know all of us all over the world have our own etiquette and what's appropriate and what's not. And some practices are familiar, to us through television or books, but some are not. So how, when you were just starting out going to Tanzania or any other African country, how would you establish what the parameters are for polite behavior? I know there are some practices. I always think of the filmmaker and author Michael Crichton talking about the first time he went to Thailand. And he had a friend who lived there who instructed him, you never sit with the sole of your feet facing another person. You do not pat people on the head. I mean, things that are just casual to Americans. We do them all the time. How would you find out about the behaviors that are acceptable and polite?
Well, I think the first recommendation I give, I think I said earlier, which is be polite, be courteous, and have big ears and a small mouth. Listen.
In another country like that.
Don't speak. Listen more than you speak, and ask questions and listen to people and find out about them. And particularly in Tanzania, they love to know everything about you and you to know everything about them. That's part of their culture. It's not just hello, how are you? Let's go. It's like they'll ask you questions about your family. They'll ask you questions about your kids. It's just part of their culture to dig and find out about people. And they don't mean it in a disrespectful way or in a probing way where we might get offended that they want to know so much information. You can ask them those kinds of questions. That might be a big part of the conversation before you ever get to your piece of business. So let's keep that in mind. But I've just been myself. I think in any country, I've always found that to be the best way, is to just be true to yourself of who you are, be courteous, be polite, and listen, and then respond accordingly, and always be conscious of that you're dealing with an unknown. And there's a whole bunch of things that you don't know. You got a lot of blind spots. There's a whole bunch of things you don't know. So always defer and don't be aggressive, but just work with whoever you're with and kind of take their lead.
Kind of good advice everywhere.
Right.
Can you tell us maybe about one of your favorite experiences while filming in Tanzania?
Oh, there's a lot of them. Probably my favorite experience was being in Mahali, which is off the Lake Tanganyika, where there's a group of chimpanzees that have been studied for the last 50 years by the Japanese. So they're pretty much habituated, but they're wild. They live in a colony, but they've tracked them for 50 years. So they all have names. They know who they are, and you have to go up into these mountains and find them. So the guides go up and find them, and then once you get there, you have about an hour once you engage with them. But then they'll keep moving, so you have to keep moving with them. But you literally have the chimps, which are about 10 times stronger than us, and they're probably about 4 feet high. 4.5 feet high. They're not tiny. Some of them are smaller, but it's just a beautiful experience. And you're up in these heavily thick jungle environment that you're walking through and climbing. It's not for It's not just a walk. But anyway, we were filming, well, we filmed, we wore masks, by the way, to protect them, the chimpanzees. But the alpha male of that group isn't the alpha male anymore, but at that time was having some trouble with another one of the members of the chimpanzee families. And all of a sudden, we're hearing all this noise in the background. I'm on this path. And you're hearing all this noise, and all of a sudden, a bunch of running, and this one chimpanzee comes and then turns just before me. And then the alpha male comes, and he basically runs right over me. And I got the whole thing on film because I didn't move. So
he ran over your body?
Well, what he did is he jumped over a branch, pulled the branch, and then the branch literally knocked me over. But everybody else had kind of moved to the side, but I was always told, well, just hold your ground. So I did. I was right in his path, but that was probably the most exciting.
That
I got many more,
probably
but that's
telling
probably
that story today.
Yeah.
I got this guy.
I got it on film.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, you had said some wonderful things about when you shoot in exotic locations, that there's a lot to be said for the joy of that experience. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I think that the joy, the more personal joy, I mean, I get a tremendous amount of joy of being out with the wildlife, but now I've been spending more time with these indigenous people and meeting them. And I've got some pictures of one encounter with the chief's mother. I think she was in her 90s. And it's just, she's such a warm, friendly person. And I had no idea what she was saying, but we had an interpreter there. But we just hit it, there was just a nice moment there. And I found that with all of the encounters I've had with these people, that they're just delightful people to be around. And it's just very heartwarming. And to see a lot of the good work that's being done over there with some of the NGOs to help kids get schooling, to get help these people protect their culture and their heritage and their language. And they just have some great social customs, some that we don't really necessarily understand or appreciate, but others that are just very things we should probably learn ourselves in our own society.
I loved what you said about going into it with an air of appreciation and respect.
Yes.
And I think that would cover filming in any country, but especially one that's so different from our local customs and culture. But thank you so much, Doug. I'm hoping you'll come back and talk to us about India and Nepal and Europe and all the other fascinating places that you've shot. And please feel free to go to Doug's YouTube channel, The Surprise Traveler. And thank you so much for joining us. And remember that realm of possibility is open to all of us. So we hope you will take advantage of it and join us next time on Producer's Toolbox. Thank you.